To order the Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 regular meeting of the Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Lavoy.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Scales.
Here.
Commissioner Barry. Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here, and Chairman Carmichael.
Here.
We have a
We
quorum.
have a quorum. Would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And while I have you standing, anyone who testifies before the commission tonight has to be sworn in. So please raise your right hand and swear that any and all testimony you give will be the whole truth. Thank you. Two reminders. First, would everyone make sure that your telephones and any other electronic devices are silenced? And the other reminder that anyone who testifies must sign in with name, address, and point of contact, either telephone or email, either here at the podium or out in the hallway. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the special meeting that we held on the 1st of March. Assume you've all read those minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Thomas.
Scales.
Motion, second is Scales. Discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Scales.
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren says yes, and Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. Also, approval of the minutes of the March 8th, 2023, our regular meeting last month. Do I have motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion Peterson.
I'll second.
Have second Lavoy. Discussion of those minutes? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Scales.
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. The next item is open forum. This is a chance for anyone present who wishes to address the commission on any item or issue that is not on our agenda tonight. Anyone present? Seeing none, we'll move on to a review of the public hearing procedures. First, the applicant is introduced and then presents his or her petition. And then secondly, we go to staff for their comments and clarifications. And thirdly, out to the public for any public comments. The petitioner, of course, can respond to the staff and to the public as those comments are made. We have our village attorney with us here to give us consultation as required. And finally, then it becomes the commissioner's turn. They can ask questions and make comments. And finally, a commissioner's vote. Just as a reminder, our vote is a recommendation only. The village board has the final say. Our vote is a recommendation to the village board. Under new business, PZC 013-3023, request from Clinton Mathis regarding the property located at 402 North Park Street in Westmont for the following. A zoning ordinance variance request to increase the maximum allowable size and length of a detached garage. Mr. Mathis. Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to our request here tonight. Sorry. We got everything in order, so I got to go with the slide.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
So just a brief brief introduction about myself. I've lived in Westmont my entire life. I went to South School over here on the south side, K through 5, moved to junior high, high school. I've been involved in Westmont in one way or another throughout my entire life. I played baseball, football, wrestling, as well as worked for Ace Hardware, and in the summers, I've worked for Public Works. If you've lived in Westmont for a while, you may have seen my father and a smaller version of myself in many of the Memorial Day parades with his John Deere tractors. We like to participate in the communities as much as we can. My wife, Melissa, grew up in Downers before we both moved or back to Westmont, I'd say, for the brief time we lived in Lisle for a couple of years before moving back. When my wife and I started looking for our forever home, we knew we wanted to live in Westmont, as we love the small hometown feel. A lot of our friends and family are here, as well as the great residents, the downtown, and amazing events. We plan on staying in Westmont for the long haul and contributing to the community. So tonight, I'm here to propose building of a new detached garage of 40 feet by 24 feet wide by 40 feet deep. Currently, we have a 22 by 20 foot garage, which in today's standards is a small 2-car. We propose to remove existing garage, the deck, and a shed, and a total of 1,030 square feet of total coverage to build a larger garage up to 2023 building codes. That new garage will also include a 30 by 30 concrete pad behind it. As we're removing the deck, we'd like a pad behind there to entertain guests and for just additional, patio space. Our current plot of land, the property sits on almost a half acre, which is considerably larger than most lots in Westmont. The lot size is 60 feet wide by 341 feet deep. The current garage is over 180 feet from the back lot line and roughly 3 feet from the north side lot line. Currently, the house, driveway, garage, deck, and shed cover roughly 4,447 square feet for a total coverage of 22% of lot coverage. With the proposed new garage, it would be 24 by 40. We would move the front of the garage west 5 feet back from the street side, as well as the north wall would move 3 feet south off the side lot line to remain 6 feet from the side lot line. With this new position of the garage, will be roughly 155 feet back from the rear lot line and 6 feet from the north lot line. New coverage would roughly be around 5,277 square feet, a total of 26% of our total lot. Currently, I'm working with an architect from Western Springs. These are my preliminary drawings that we have right now. This is the first draft of our elevation drawings. Nothing is finalized yet. On the drawing, you can see there's a full foundation under the whole garage, because we do know that it's over 600 square feet and would require the principal foundation. There would be a 18-foot garage door on the front, as well as a 10-foot door, overhead door on the back, to create a through spot to get to the patio. The height of the garage will not exceed 15 feet 6 inches. Currently, it's at 14 feet 8 inches, as long as everything goes according to plan. These are the plan drawings here. This is just an overhead. As you can see, it's the same layout. The 2 overhead doors, as well as one side lot door. Here we have a little bit more clear drawings, not quite as detailed, but it's basically the same thing. 24 foot wide on the front and 40 feet deep on the side. Here's another closer version of it, but this is the floor plan basically, with a 30-foot pad behind it connected to it. This is a 3D rendering we had done up. Going from the top left corner and going clockwise, that'll be that first drawing there on the top left will face the east towards the street. The next one to the right, that faces the west, that's to the back of the house. And then on the bottom left, that is the south side and the east side, and then the last one, the north and west side. Because this lot is so large, more lawn equipment and tools are needed to be stored. Currently, I only have a lawn tractor and a leaf vacuum that take up quite a bit of room, and I'd like to be investing in more tools to keep up with the property. Along with the yard equipment and lawn equipment, I would like to be able to accommodate 2 full-size vehicles. I have included other properties around our home which have larger garages than the 576 allowed square feet, most of which have similar lot sizes to ours. Again, I grew up on the south side here on 225 South Wilmette, which is another large lot. It's 100 feet by 300 feet deep. I understand the number of tools and equipment that is needed to keep up with a unique property. As a trusted and cordial neighbor, we'd want to ensure our property looks desirable and maintains curb appeal. The large garage would also protect and secure personal property from any unpredicted weather that we are somehow getting up here in northern Illinois the last few years. As previously had shown, the property is larger than the average R3 residence in Westmont and can accommodate the large garage and patio without affecting the area. From the front side, the garage from the street side will appear as a standard 2-car garage. I did some research and looked up some comparable projects in their area. There have been a couple other projects that have requested a larger size for detached garages, one of which was on North Park as well, the same lot or same street I am on. That was not a similar square footage size, but one a little higher than the standards. So it was a 24 by 30 size, but it also had a second floor on that one. Reasons we don't want to attach is it would create more unneeded space for the home that we don't need. It would greatly increase the price of our project that we just don't think that would be beneficial, and it would cut off access to our backyard as well as our neighbors that we just, we don't want to do that to our neighbors. In conclusion, the large 0.47 acre lot requires more tools and equipment to take proper care of the property. 402 North Park is very large, and keeping equipment and personal property outside would be an eyesore to the neighbors. The new garage would keep cars, tools safe and secure from weather and theft. A garage of this size on most lots in Westmont would impede on the neighbors, but in our area, the lots can accommodate this size detached garage very well. My brother and I are currently living in Westmont, and we continue to live in Westmont to continue with the communities here. I do have a few neighbors here tonight that if anybody's willing, would like to ask any questions to, they're more than happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to staff. Mr. Hinterfeld?
Actually, Mr. Williams will be covering this one. Joel will take it.
In which case,
Yes.
we'll go to Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. They've touched on a lot already, so I won't go over a lot of the stuff they already touched on. But for a general idea of where this is located, 402 North Park is on the intersection of North Park Street and Willard Place, and it's bordering Downers Grove on the north side, or on the west side. As they noted, the lot is about 20,536 square feet, 60 by 341 feet. The existing residency is 1,200 square feet in size, and the existing garage is about 440 square feet. As Clinton already noted, they're looking at demolishing the existing detached garage and the deck that's currently there, and constructing a new 24-foot by 40-foot detached garage with an area of 960 square feet and that rear paved area of 900 square feet. So this really is in our code. It's a single line for the variance request, but it's really 2 items. There's the area request and then the length. So the village's zoning ordinance regulates detached garages by limiting them to a size of 576 square feet and a length of 28 feet. This is really regardless of the property size or dimensions, and it's uniform across all properties within the village. So with the size, as they noted, of 960 square feet, the proposed detached garage would exceed the permitted size of 576 square feet by about 66%, or 384 square feet. And then the length of the 40-foot length that they're proposing would exceed the permitted garage length of 28 feet by about 43% of what would be permitted, or 12 feet. In the staff report, there's a little table showing you those differences. The garage largely complies with all the other zoning bulk regulations. As they noted, the total lot coverage would be increased to approximately 25%, which is still under the permitted 35% within that zoning district, the R3 zoning district. Another thing we asked them to accommodate was moving the garage to a 6-foot setback on the side property line, as the building's going to be larger. The requirement in the zoning code is only for 3 feet. And then, as he noted, and in the staff report, there are elevations that he's attached. And we would ask, if approved, that the ordinance either has an exhibit of the site plan that was given to us with the 6-foot setback, so we can require that from them, or if it's written into the ordinance with the 6-foot setback. And we would look to John for the correct way of having a motion, or just within the motion requiring that exhibit. And then I'm open to any questions from the commission or from the petitioner.
Sorry, what was the question?
No, I'm open to any questions from the commission.
All right, thank you. Public's turn. Anyone present like to come up and address the board on this? Neighbors, friends, enemies? Okay. We'll move on to the commissioners. And Commissioner Van Buren, you've been on this board for a long, long time. So what say you?
I say that over the years, we've had several requests for oversized garage. The only time I would object is if we're being used for commercial use, such as if you're going to do mechanic work. But if it's for residential use, the size of the garage, that doesn't bother me at all.
For residential.
Yeah. And I also want to congratulate you on a very, very fine presentation and doing the research, all the places that have oversized garage and so on. So I'm all for it.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Scales.
Sure. No, thank you for the presentation. I don't really have any questions or comments. I guess the only thing I didn't notice on the floor plan was where you're putting the big screen television to watch the game.
That's still up for debate, yeah. We haven't decided that yet.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Same here, very supportive of the application, and the presentation was very good. And the only thing I have a question for staff is that it kind of lends itself, if they ever wanted to put a roof over that patio, it's not adding to the impervious. They could do that as part of their plan, correct, without any other requirements in front of this board?
They would have to come back in for permitting for whatever structure they're
Just for
proposing.
permitting, though, there wouldn't be anything
correct.
special here.
Yeah.
So they could actually build a roof over that without any additional requirements, right? Just an FYI.
If I may chime in, if the roof is attached to the garage, we'd consider it part of the footprint of the garage, so they'd probably have to get a variance to expand it. But there are lots of ways to construct roofs over things now separated from the garage, so that could always occur just with permits.
Got it. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson.
Well, it was a very good presentation. I just have a little bit of an issue of a garage being 40 feet long. I know you can't necessarily see it from the street. For one reason, I think it sets a precedence. All the years I worked for the village, people always you know, it was quite a usual thing where people wanted to build bigger garages. The way the majority of the people back then were able to do it is with an attached, because then it can be, you know, basically any size you want, as long as you don't go over lot coverage. And I know your lot is huge, but there are a lot of 300-foot lots in town. I grew up on a 300-foot lot, so I know what that's like. I don't know. I'm kind of torn because I just think it's, even though you have a big piece of property, it's a huge structure. I mean, it kind of looks like a barn almost, you know, and I don't know. I've been thinking about this, and I actually live in the neighborhood now, and I went by, and like I say, I know you wouldn't see it from the street, but I'm up in the air. That's my only thing. And I was gonna ask why you don't do it attached, and then you gave, you know, your presentation was point on with all my questions. But as of right now, I still don't have a decision on which way to go, because it's just, so huge. And I know from past, you know, when you start letting people do things, and then the next guy comes in, and the next guy comes in, and then, you know, in a few years from now, there's gonna be giant garages everywhere. And I understand you guys have a lot of stuff, and I, you know, I know all that, but that's actually my honest opinion. I'm just not, just the size of it is kind of overwhelming. So, they answered all my questions, so I don't have any questions. I'm just kind of wishy-washy on, it's just so huge.
All right, thank you. Mr. Thomas?
It is a large garage, but it's a large lot. And if you want to put 2 cars in there, which you should be able to, and I went by, and like I told you, you know, and looked around the garage and saw how deep that lot is, and I would not want to cut grass on a walking lawnmower for there. You know, it'd be 3 days and I'd be done, you know. My only initial question was the height of the garage, since it's so big. You're going to put 2 cars in there and the equipment to take care of just not grass, but the lot. I was just worried about going too high, maybe for some storage or whatever, you know, people like to put a lot in there, and I wouldn't want to do that. That you would see, you know, and who wants to live next door to that kind of thing? So I support your presentation and your request.
All right, thank you. I have a couple of questions for staff. What about this issue of setting a precedent? It's
Yeah, that's,
so now 40 feet becomes the automatic, or?
And I don't want to speak for our discussion later, but we would likely look into a text amendment, depending on how many we've already approved in the past. We'd probably look at exploring that.
We've had a number of these.
Correct, yeah. We've had a few in the past 10 years. I have them listed out. They've all been different sizes, and they've all been approved so far within the village.
I'd also say that, you know, every variance request is taken on its own merits, based on its own unique facts.
Right.
Consider the overall size of the lot, what other improvements are on the lot, the overall lot coverage, the closeness of adjoining houses compared to where the detached garage is going to be located, any draining impact, et cetera, and that's unique in every instance.
So it's not necessarily a precedent,
Correct.
any specific number.
Correct.
All right, thank you. And another question, staff, if, you said these plans are preliminary,
Yes.
and so if the commission recommends approval of this, what changes can be made after that
Okay, so
we're approving a preliminary?
this is
plan
very
supposed
similar to like when you have a subdivision that comes before you and the developer shows the houses. The commission is not approving a site plan, and they're not approving the design of the structure. So basically, in this case, what you're approving is a size and a length.
All right.
Now, what Scott has indicated was, staff had concern that this building is pretty much the size of a house. And we allow garages to be 3 feet away from someone's property line. And so he worked with the petitioner to say, well, can you do it to the minimum of what a house requires, which is 6? So that's why Scott said, well, we'd really either like to adopt the site plan as an exhibit or that the ordinance states that it would be 6 feet away, because what we would hate is that when it does come in for permit, we've only addressed size and length, and then they've moved it back 3 feet because we're not locking in a site plan. So what they can do is they can change the design, as long as it's not closer than 6 feet, as long as we get that in the ordinance somewhere. And then it would have to abide by the other rules of garages, which basically a height maximum of 15 feet. And I know he said 15.6. We measure height on sloped roofs to the midpoint of the slope. So the peak of the roof can actually be over 15 feet. We measure to the midpoint. So as long as it still met those parameters, even if it was shifted over 10 feet into the middle of the lot, we could approve it. So you're not approving the elevations and you're not approving the actual site plan. You're approving the size, the length, and potentially a minimum of 6 feet away to make sure that this 40-foot-long structure is 6 feet away from the neighbor's property line.
And one example, when you read this motion, I think we can add on a phrase that looks to approve it as written with the proposed garage to comply with the size, location, and setbacks as shown on applicant's site plan, and that might be enough protection to protect the village.
All right. Thank you. That was illuminating. That's all I have. And I think unless we have any more discussion, that Chair is prepared to, under PCC 1013-2023, zoning ordinance variance request to increase the max allowable size and length of this detached garage, would accept a motion to approve.
Motion, Scales.
Second, Lavoy.
I have a motion, Scales, second, Lavoy. Further discussion?
My only request is that motion is amended to add the phrase, so it would be a zoning ordinance variance to increase the maximum allowable size and length of a detached garage with the proposed garage to comply with the size, location, and setbacks as shown on applicant's site plan.
All right, as stated. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Scales?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
No.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes?
And Commissioner Scales? Yeah, Chairman Carmichael.
Yes. So there you have it. You have a positive recommendation from the board to the, or from the commission to the village board, and staff will notify you when you're scheduled to go before the board.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
We'll be looking at the May 18th meeting.
Okay. Sounds
And I'll let you guys, I'll contact you tomorrow probably.
Okay.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Okay, there's no further new business, but under miscellaneous, first, we have a discussion item on zoning ordinance update, both for revision topics and an R3 zoning district. And who from staff is going to address these? Mr. Hennerfein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we wanted to have a quick discussion tonight because it hasn't been thoroughly discussed here at Planning and Zoning yet. But in the last year's budget, which we're in a new budget cycle, but the money is still set aside, there was money set aside to look at a complete zoning ordinance rewrite.
Yay.
We've needed it for many years.
That one on the record.
And which has been very evident from kind of the amount of text amendments that we need to bring forth. And typically, the frequency of text amendments kind of illustrates how out of date your zoning ordinance is. So what we wanted to do tonight is first make sure that the Planning and Zoning Commission is aware. So we've already secured a consultant. Consultant's called Duncan Associates. They've done lots of work in the area. I think they did Downer's zoning ordinance rewrite a few years ago. And that was after we did an RFP and we interviewed several firms. So we have secured the consultant. The consultant won't bring forth or start involving the planning and zoning until they've at least done some research and some work with staff to understand what it is staff feels is important in the rewrite. And then at some point, they're going to be before planning and zoning, probably several times. Probably a lot of public input. But we wanted to at least give you the list of things that we're asking them to investigate. So what we gave you in your packet was a list of items that we're giving to Duncan, basically what we've recognized over the years as deficiencies in our code that we probably should address. And I want to highlight that just because it's listed here doesn't mean we want something. It means we're asking them to investigate something. So I'm not going to go through every item, but I'm going to touch on a lot of things. And then we're going to have a little bit more of a discussion about some of the residential districts to kind of wrap things up. So as I said, we're not looking at just a few text amendments. It'll probably be formatted very similarly. We'll probably keep some of the most recent code sections that are more relevant, such as we just approved an entire non-conforming section. A few years ago, we did signs. We'll probably ask them to examine signs, but it might be changes in signs. About a year ago, I think we did the telecommunications and towers. We'll ask them to look at that and make sure it's still current. So when I say complete rewrite, there might be some sections that are salvaged. But we will be asking them to basically say, we have put Band-Aids on this for years. We have conflicting sections. We really need to look at this comprehensively. So some of those items that we're going to be asking them to look at are things like short-term rentals. So Airbnbs have been a topic for years. We don't have any prohibitions or allowances for them. I'm not going to say what right and wrong is in that case, but we're asking them to look at those. I wrote ADUs on here, and one of my commissioners didn't know what those were, and I'm guessing most of you don't know what those are. Those are accessory dwelling units. Although maybe not a trend in the western suburbs just yet, accessory dwelling units really kind of began out of people that wanted mother-in-law suites. And you're basically creating or trying to create an independent apartment within your home because you want to give some aspect of independent living. And many communities have started allowing those. Right now, when we look at our zoning ordinance, if you're in a single family, you're not allowed to have a second unit. There's a lot of regulation that goes with that. I'm not going to say if we want them or don't want them, but we're asking them to look into what the trends are and see what other communities are doing. We don't have any rules or regulations on EV charging. So if a commercial property wants to install a charging station, we don't have any rules or regulations on that. Yes?
The EV charging for residential, that you just get a permit for that, so that's not what we're talking about here?
We are not.
It's commercial.
And mostly when you do EV charging in a home, it's going to be in your garage, it's going to be a plug. When you get into commercial, they're saying, we want to take away required parking spaces and put in a bank of 10 of these. And then sometimes they want to put a canopy over those, and what are the setbacks for those, or can they advertise on those? It's those kind of things that we try to see. So if you've ever been to the shopping mall in Willowbrook, they've got EV charging stations near their main drive aisle, and they have scrolling LED advertising. Well, our code doesn't really allow that, and maybe we don't want to allow that. So we need to start addressing that. Solar panels, right now our code is very silent on how to install solar panels and the parameters on that. We allow them, but we don't have a lot of rules and regulations for those. Wind turbines, we are moving into an era where alternative forms of energy are coming about. We don't have any rules or regulations on wind turbines. If you've ever lived in a residence and your neighbor puts up a wind turbine, they're pretty noisy. So you want to regulate those. Dark skies, I had a different commissioner ask me about dark skies. Those are basically rules and regulations on outdoor lighting at night.
I know.
And that you don't want to broadcast it upwards because there are negative environmental effects for artificial lighting on the environment and birds and migration and things like that. Some of the other things we're looking at, and this goes into tonight's case. So one of the first things under general provisions is our accessory structures and uses. So I'll use tonight's example. So I think this is at least the third oversized garage that's come before this commission in the last couple years, where the uniqueness of the property has been cited as a large lot. So we will likely look at our garage sizes in comparison with other communities, and perhaps we should be proposing that a larger lot can have a larger garage. Because I would much rather be in a position, number one, to not have to bring variances to this board because someone has a larger lot, but also set standards. So you had one before us tonight that was at 960 and a length of 40. Well, maybe we want to come out with parameters and say, well, lots over 15,000 square feet can have larger than the norm up to a size, so that we hold firm. So if we say, well, no, the 1,000 square feet is really as big as we want to go, no matter how big your lot is, we can codify that. We can put it in the code. And then the trick is, once we adopt that ordinance, we want to stick to it and truly only approve things that are unique outside of that. So that's probably something we'll look at, because we, as the commission, are consistently approving those. And whenever you're consistently approving something, it means that maybe the code is wrong. We're going to look at the definitions. We're going to look at our signs, parking requirements. I know over the years we've had many parking stall variances. Our code is very outdated. We require a lot of parking in comparison to some other communities. If you've ever been, at Jewel Osco and say the parking lot's never full, that's because we have high parking requirements. We see that with, the fast food restaurants. Not nearly as many people dine in anymore. They all run through the drive-through. They want double drive-throughs. They want areas to pick up for their, the Uber Eats and the places that pick it up. But not nearly as many people are dining inside. So we're looking at, do we have outdated parking standards? We'd like to update our landscape requirements. Our landscape requirements are pretty minimal compared to other communities. We'd like to see if we should beef those up a bit. Other performance standards, design guidelines. We have design guidelines. Should we integrate some language into that? Land use things, like I said, I'm not going to go through everything. We're going to look at new districts. So we have our zoning districts. There's been a lot of talk about Liberty Park, and are we eventually going to annex that in? Those are substandard lots to our code. So should we have a zoning district for Liberty Park? Those are all 50-foot wide lots. They're all really small. When those get annexed, if those get annexed, they're not going to fit any of our rules and regulations. So should we create a new zoning district in anticipation of something like that? We don't have a zoning district for what we consider governmental or public or quasi-public uses. A lot of communities, churches, schools, government facilities are in a special zoning district just for those. And if you remember, we had a water tower come through here a few months ago, and it was in a residential district, and we had to give it variances from residential standards. Well, is it fair that we're treating schools and water towers like residences, or should they have their own zoning district that has greater allowances for those types of uses? So that's one of the things we'll have them look at. Other bulk requirements, just make sure that we're in line. We don't talk about this next one very much here at Planning and Zoning, but we do have what's called a B1 downtown development permit in our downtown, which basically means that any business in the downtown needs a special approval from the board. We're looking at if that's appropriate or if it should be removed. Our planned unit development code is very substandard. Mr. Zemanak's been asking us to change it for years. We're finally going to look at changing it. And then administrative processes and approvals. If you remember, we brought Mrs. Tees back a few weeks ago because we have no mechanism for minor changes that staff can approve. That is very common for the director to be able to approve minor changes that don't affect the overall concept and don't violate any setbacks or anything like that. So we don't have that mechanism, so we burden the petitioner to come back, and that always slows down projects. So the last thing I want to talk about, and actually, so do I have any questions on that kind of stuff? And what I do want to do is say, I encourage each and every one of you, if you have something that you want to be heard on any one of these topics or a topic that you think should be addressed, let staff know. Send us an email and say, Joe, in another community, I've seen they do something like this. Can you make sure you look into that? We're here at this point to be receptive to those types of things. So by all means, reach out to us. We can have a one-on-one discussion. You can send me an email. We can have a phone call. We can integrate that. We're at the research stage with our consultant right now. So any questions on those pieces?
Please.
I encourage questions. Don't be scared.
Yeah, it's just that everybody knows that I'm going to ask questions, right? So anyway, I think that my knee-jerk reaction to what you're saying and this, we're on the cusp of making these significant changes, is a couple things. One is totally supported because I've gone through the frustration here in Westmont of trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. And it is time-consuming for staff, it's time-consuming for applicants, it's time-consuming across the board. So I'm glad to see the PUD, the TOD, don't want to limit it to just downtown, I kind of want to have it out there. But the struggles too over recent applications were really with the comp plan. So if we're going to go through the exercise of a total rewrite of the code, it should really be consistent with the comp plan that's updated. So I really think that that should be part of, that would be my recommendation to staff, to include at least a revision to the comp plan, to include, you know, specific directions like on the golf course property and other things that, that we could do to maybe look at a new application coming down the road. But the comp plan really needs it.
And what you're saying has been discussed. We know the comp plan needs updated. There were only funds to do one of the two in this year cycle, and we wanted to take the opportunity because, yes, the comp plan's updated, but the economy's still settling, and we didn't want to address a comp plan until we were further out of COVID. Because if we did it now, it might become outdated very quickly. So we decided that we wanted to address the zoning, and the zoning would not say what the goal of the comp plan was. But we are very cognizant of that, and that is coming afterwards.
Yeah, last comment, and I know I have many on this topic, but the one thing that sticks out at me, like in this discussion, is we've had applicants. I'll give you an example. The food market up here on Cass Avenue, the little vegetable stand across from where the old 7-Eleven was, I forget the name of it, came to us for.
Nature's Best.
Nature's Best, came to us for a parking lot expansion, and they had one of those trees in the middle of their property. And there are three trees in their property, and the replacement requirements to get one of our businesses that have been downtown was enormous, and then the parking lot wasn't built. My own personal opinion is that that particular ordinance needs to be adjusted.
And
I could say it a lot more harshly, but it's way too stringent. And when you look at the condition of the trees and look at what else is going on around the village with even tree pruning, I mean, it's nutty. Our tree ordinance needs to be looked at.
And unfortunately, the tree ordinance is not a part of the zoning ordinance, so this will not have an effect on that. But what you're saying, the discussions are already there, and they're recognized. So your frustration is already being discussed internally. But unfortunately, that ordinance is within the tree and landscape code. And what you're expressing is that ordinance that's not in the zoning code has a great effect on development. And we recognize that, and it is being discussed.
Okay.
Anybody else? I have more to say, don't worry. All right. Okay, so one of the things that we are looking into is we have recognized that over time, we have 4 single-family detached residential zoning districts. About 98% of our community is zoned R3, which is our smallest lots, minimum is 7,800 square feet. And that represents the bulk of our community.
What was that percentage?
That's a best guess, I'd say about 98% are these small lots.
98?
That would be my guess. You can question me, maybe it's 90.
I am questioning you again.
I don't know the tally of all the properties in the village, but it's about 200 properties. So, one of the things that we are considering is, are we truly a community of what I'm going to call estate lots? So our R1 is our largest lots, R1A is a little bit smaller, R2 is a little bit smaller. That's why I gave us the table that's at the tail end of this here, is so that we could have it all in front of us. Now, most of our large lots exist in the southeast quadrant of the village. We've already amended our ordinances for annexations so that any new annexations automatically become R3. It used to be they automatically became R1. And we have been fairly consistent for any subdivisions that have been occurring in these areas. When they request an R3 zoning, we have been very consistent with the planning and zoning to grant those. So this is kind of a discussion on if we are typically saying yes, should we amend our code? So one of the things we are looking at is, should we eliminate R1, R1A, and R2 zoning districts? Because it is a very small amount of our remaining community, and we have been consistent when someone does come before us and ask for a rezoning. So there's lots of effects, and I'm not going to discuss them all tonight. I really just wanted to present it to see if there was general support or general resistance to. Because what we are doing, if we were to rezone these properties, is they're probably, out of those 200, maybe are 50 or 60 properties that could be subdivided, that would have to ask for a rezoning if they were subdivided. If we amended the code, they could subdivide without a rezoning. Now, does that mean they won't come to us for a subdivision? No, they would always still have to come to planning and zoning and the board for a subdivision, because we approve all subdivisions through here. But in that case, we would not be debating about should it be rezoned and subdivided. We would only be saying, does the subdivision meet the standards of the R3? And if it does, and if it meets our stormwater protocols, then basically it can be approved. So, but it is an acknowledgement that we are not an estate lot community. And I do turn to Wally, because our R1A zoning district, if you look at this, obviously there's a difference in size, there's a difference in minimum lot width, but there is one thing that is consistent, and that is front yard setbacks, except for the R1A district. Everything in our residential districts is a 35-foot setback. The R1A is a 50-foot setback. The R1A is a subsection on 64th Street and some on 65th Street that was introduced, I think, in the 80s, maybe the 90s, because those homeowners were very vocal about wanting to preserve estates. So that would be a profound difference. That when I'm looking at this, and I included the last page of the map just so you had it. it's the mid-green color on 64th Street. So it's not the light green, it's not the dark green, it's that middle green color. I see a property at 528 64th Street, and that's the only property in that block that is large. So potentially that could subdivide if it was rezoned R3. And then I see one property down on 65th Street, 516 65th Street, and that means that could subdivide and have a reduced setback. And all those that don't need subdivisions, new homes could be built at that 35-foot setback. So I put it out there that this is something we're exploring, and then I turn it to you for any comments you may have.
Well, the thing, I remember it when these lots came in, and of course, as you said, it was to create the Oak Brook type of atmosphere with the larger lot and larger setbacks. So we have several that are 50 feet setback. That is a minimum. I was just talking to Scott about that. That's a minimum, so they would still conform if you went to R3, because we're saying be at least 35. We're not saying you have.
Yes, all those existing homes would be compliant. It's just you could build a new home next to it that's 15 feet closer to the street.
You could, but you could,
Yes.
but you probably wouldn't.
I'd like to say, but it never fails that someone wants to do
Well,
just the minimum of the code.
it wouldn't devalue the property of those who currently have a R1 or R1.
I think that's a valid point, is that 15-foot difference devaluing other properties?
So it was done with the thought of the future, there being many more like it coming in. But we've now gone back to everything coming in as R3 and requiring R3 standards. So I don't see any damage done by going back to making it all R3.
I know Commissioner Peterson had something to say.
Well, I'm confused by like existing lots on R1 and R1A. If you change it to R3, and those are like the bigger mansion houses, one burns down to the ground, then would you have to follow the R3 stuff to rebuild it?
Well, you would use the R3 to rebuild it. However, the R3 is less restrictive than what it would be now. So, right, let's say it was R1A, and the house was sitting at a 50-foot setback and it burned down. They could still build it at 50 feet, or they could come as close as 35 feet. They have more room to work with. So it's not becoming more restrictive, it's becoming less restrictive.
By the same token, on the same kind of lot, if you came in new and you came in under R3, you could still go to 50 feet back, because we're saying that's the minimum, 35. So,
Yeah.
I think the profound difference is if you have an older home on one of these larger lots, those are the ones the developers buy and then come to us and say, can we subdivide this? If it's zoned R1 right now, and it's 150 feet wide, we would say, you can't subdivide it to two lots because R1 requires a 100-foot wide lot. And you can't, those would end up with 75-foot wide lots. If it was rezoned, when we eliminated that zoning district, well, the R3 zoning district only requires 60-foot wide lots. So you could get two lots out of that. And if it was 180 feet wide in R1, you could only get one lot, but you could get three lots if it was R3. So the difference is that when the developers purchase these properties, they automatically have rights to subdivide it potentially into two lots, whereas right now they don't have the right to subdivide it into two lots. So that's the real difference, is if it came before us, we wouldn't first have a debate on saying, is this rezoning appropriate for the neighborhood? what we would have already determined was R3 is appropriate for our village, is really what this boils down to.
Most,
But then it's
98% of
also appropriate for the people that have already established it. So, but the few that you're talking about that that have old homes that were there before they came in with the R1, R1A, they are, and there are a couple of them in that area, and that would present a little problem to the
Yes.
current homeowners.
So I have a question then. So if I buy 3 R3 zone lots, can I re-subdivide those into one lot?
You mean consolidate them into one
Yeah.
lot? Yes, there's nothing that would stop you from doing that.
And would they just still be under R3 zoning?
Yes.
Based on what so then later on, if I wanted to sell it to a developer, he or she would have the opportunity to have 3 separate lots again?
Well, however, the length, when you combine those 3 lots, however, as long as they met that 60-foot wide minimum and the 7,800 square foot lot size, and then what's not written in the zoning ordinance, which is in the subdivision ordinance, it would also have to have a minimum 125-foot lot depth. So if it met those 3 parameters, then they could chop it up to as many as they can get in those parameters.
Is the end goal to be able to provide for that type of density for future development?
Well, I don't know that there's an end goal, but I think what it does is it does create opportunity for more homes to be constructed.
To be constructed, you said?
So
Right.
basically, that the older homes, can be brought in, or, basically replaced with newer homes. So basically, the housing stock would be improving.
So that's the village's logic, they want,
Well, I don't think there's any village logic behind it. I think we're looking and saying, the commission has been very consistent on approving these, just like that garage. If it's consistent, should we look at changing? And that's what we're doing, is we're looking at changing. And one of the benefits to changing is that new development is easier.
They don't have to come to us to.
Well, they don't have to come to us for the zoning ordinance change. They would just come to us for the subdivision.
Makes sense.
Passive lot splits.
Joe, a couple things. What that I see elsewhere is repurposing, like, for example, school buildings that are no longer, have closed and now being repurposed into a different type of use. And we're seeing that even in our community. We see opportunity here on our golf courses, for example. We're seeing golf courses really get strained financially because they just can't survive on what they have. So golf courses are getting improved. I wouldn't necessarily, my personal opinion is I wouldn't want to see R1 go away for that reason. If it's there, it's been there, maybe there's an opportunity for, an R1 district on the north side of town when something gets redeveloped, or on one of these pieces. Because now we look at, everything's getting smaller, apartments and that kind of thing, but that could change. Because we should have that flexibility in the code. And I wouldn't necessarily want to see that taken away.
But you could still build that size.
You could still
right?
build that size, yeah.
Correct? If you wanted to build.
You could still build that size, and those are some very good points.
I agree with
I think the only difference, so because we have the map in front of us, we have the county golf course on 63rd. So
Oh.
that's zoned R1 right now.
Uh-huh.
So if we played the scenario of what happens if that goes away and someone buys it and says, I want to develop that. Well, right now it's zoned R1, and they couldn't automatically do small lots of R3.
Yeah.
They would first have to say, the first response is that's R1, and that has a minimum lot size, which is pretty big. Those are estate lots. And then they would have to ask for that request to make smaller lots.
Yeah, I get that.
I think what you're saying is on the north side, is could we guide them to say, well, what we support on that redevelopment is R1 development, not R3 development.
Yeah.
And I think what Commissioner Scales is saying, well, even if R3 is the only choice, a development like that, we would still have a lot of input to say, well, but we foresee larger lots
You
here.
know, larger lot size.
Now, they'd have a lot of rights, under the R3, but usually those projects are planned development, and then we have some leverage there with a planned development.
That's what I was gonna ask. I mean, these golf course sites, if they were developed, would most likely be a PD or a PUD.
And honestly, the example I just gave, if we did everything with the zoning ordinance reread, I think that we want to do, is that R1 golf course would probably be rezoned some sort of government institution. And so then it wouldn't even be zoned for someone just to buy it and then try to develop it. They'd still have to go through some sort of
Process,
rezoning.
right,
So,
Makes sense.
yeah.
so really the discussion was to see if this is kind of an off-the-wall
overdue.
discussion. We're just looking at trying to simplify the things that we do here, and when we simplify the things that we do here, we can do what we want to do better, if we're not distracted with some of the extraneous stuff.
And Joe, just to clarify that the contractor, the Duncan Associates, is not associated with this, they're only with the zoning ordinances.
Well, what it is they'll be
We're
working.
not having them look at.
No, we are having them look at trends, look at other communities, and then look at our own zoning ordinance and say, how are we going to rewrite all of this?
Yeah.
What we're trying to figure out is if part of that rewrite should be is that we eliminate a zoning district. And that is staff interaction with with the consultant. That is not the consultant saying to us, you should do this, so.
If there's an addition of a zoning district, I just was working on a deal in Burr Ridge, and they have a transition zoning, which I thought was an interesting classification. It was a good catch-all for a school project that I'm working on there, and seemed to be some other things in there. Anyway, I was gonna email you, but I'm right here, so.
I kind of support that too, because especially in our community and all the communities along Ogden Avenue, there was never really a transitional zoning piece between commercial on Ogden and residential. It's always a difficult thing to get redeveloped. And, if we're going to do a rewrite, we should have opportunities like that to go to some sort of transitional zoning to single family.
And at this point, we're trying not to tell the consultant, we told the consultant where we know our code is deficient, and we're saying, tell us, what good and bad is, and then we can sit and talk around the table.
Let them earn their check, right?
Yeah. And personally, one of my goals out of this zoning ordinance rewrite is when we get another 1 West Quincy, or when we get another 1 North Cass, rather than a laundry list of variances,
Please.
there are no variances, because we've said, if you're going to build in our downtown, this is how tall you can be, this is what your setbacks can be. Just meet what we want, rather than giving us a laundry list of things you can't meet. So,
Yeah, it's like a Pandora's box that way.
yes. Okay, so that was the end of my discussion. We can discuss all night if you want. Otherwise, I can go to the closing items on what I wanted to finish up with.
Okay, that was helpful, thank you.
Okay, so since I was talking, I'll just go into the general update. So in your packet tonight is the 2023 zoning map. We've given you in the past the big ones. We found that these 11 by 17, where it divides the village up into 4, is much more readable. So we've given that to you tonight. Just one note on that. So we do adopt an annual map that is the official zoning ordinance. But right after we adopted that, actually, right after the first of the year, so the zoning ordinance map reflects everything up to the first of the year. Right after the first of the year, we forcibly annexed about 18 or 20 properties. So our boundaries changed. So we felt it was best to produce an updated map. It's not the official map of 2023, it's an updated map for you, so that we aren't scratching our heads when we say, well, Joe, but that property's not in the village. And I say, well, actually it is. It's just, it happened after we adopted the map. So those maps are in your packets tonight.
Joe, can I add something really quick?
Yes.
If anybody who does want the poster size ones like you had in years past, I do have extras, so just send Joe or me an email and I can provide that for next meeting.
And then it's available online too. And actually, if you haven't looked yet, there is an interactive zoning map on the village's website that ITE has been very diligent putting together. It's a stellar resource. So you can go and plug in an address. It takes you to the property, tells you what the zoning is. I think to find that, you go under either resident for residents or for businesses, and underneath it, it says GIS maps. I'll give several reminders. The APA conference is not until the fall, but we always offer the opportunity to our plan commissioners. There is a plan commissioner training. So plant the seed that if you want to go to training, we always encourage that. I thank Commissioner Scales and Commissioner Carmichael, who did it last year.
Yeah, two of us.
We did.
But I also typically, if there's funding, offer the opportunity. There are some really great other trainings there, and commissioners can get discounted rates. So one of the big projects that came before us this year was this BTR, Build to Rent Communities. They have classes on build to rent. If you want to educate yourself, we're always happy to see if we have money in the budget to do those other classes as well. So I just want to plant that seed.
How do we know about all those classes?
When the actual conference is posted, I will give you guys links to see what those are. And then lastly, we do still have the June 14th meeting scheduled. That's the next scheduled meeting. Right now, I don't have any items. I'm not going to cancel it just yet, but there is the possibility that we may not have the meeting in June. So, and that's all I have for you.
And that, of course, is Commissioner Van Buren's birthday. So if we were to have the meeting, he could take us all out afterwards.
You would, Mr. Chairman, you would allow him to take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all heart. I would point out, before we adjourn, that on the Monday, the 29th, is the annual Memorial Day Parade down Cass Avenue, and then that's at 10 a.m., I believe, and then followed by a ceremony at Veterans Park that they have every year. Before we adjourn, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to bring up or discuss? In which case, Chair would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Scales.
Second.
Scales, second Thomas. All in favor, say aye.
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 This meeting is adjourned.